Oh my God, I just came out of the closet, kind of, the age closet.
Well, my husband lost his job completely unexpectedly from a high-tech firm. And, he was happily employed, really enjoyed the job. And then boom, he'd been told he was one of their top engineers a few months beforehand.
For a lot of people that have joined us today, it's not one thing, it's many things. And sometimes that can feel like just, sort of gut punch after gut punch after gut punch.
It doesn't mean that it's necessarily true in the end, but it is true now. In this moment right now, that's how I feel. And we want to honor that moment and help that process through and then see where we land. Do it again, see where we land. And we always move forward in a more positive perspective.
I feel like I'm in great company, so I feel better already.
Now we've mentioned that quote, it almost feels like that could have been the subtitle for this podcast. Life is what happens while you're busy making other plans. Hello and welcome to the Susan Squared podcast. I'm Susan Bushell, energy therapist.
And I'm Susan Van Klink, executive coach. And this is our podcast on navigating life shifts and consciously creating the change that you want to see in your life.
We're so glad that you could join us. Let's get started.
Thanks, Susan. And thanks everyone who is with us today. We're always excited by the live group of people that we have come be a part of this recording. And it's great to see everyone who's shown up with us today to talk about unexpected life shifts. And as we were getting ready for this episode, Susan and I were talking about our own unexpected life shifts. We've each had at least a few through the course of our lives. For me, thinking back, the very first life shift that I experienced was my parents' divorce, which really shook things up for the whole family. Not only was it very unexpected to learn that my parents were deciding to separate, or more aptly, that my dad had decided that he needed to go and be on his own. And that really changed things for us. We sold our house. We bought a new house in a new town. We changed location. I changed schools in grade 10, which was sort of a difficult time to be starting fresh. And just a few years after that, I made the conscious decision to do a Rotary exchange trip to Australia, but that had unexpected life shift experiences built in as well. And then most recently for me, my dad was diagnosed with a terminal illness, living in our home, and I was his primary caregiver for the last months of his life. And so that was another unexpected life shift for me. And what I experienced is they're not necessarily fun while you're going through them. And looking back, you might choose not to go through them if you had the choice, because these unexpected life shifts are often not things we choose to do, but things that happen to us. But almost always, and in all of those three situations, I can look back and see the gift in what happened during that time and the impact that it had on my life and subsequent choices that I made. So, while they're not easy to navigate, and certainly there are tools and tips and tricks that we're going to talk about over this next 90 minutes that help you to navigate them easier and make it so that it doesn't maybe impact you as much. They can be gifts from the universe if sort of managed well, and looking back in retrospect, each one led me to where I am today, and that's a good place. So I do see them as gifts from the universe. How about you, Susan? When I say unexpected life shifts, what does it bring forward for you?
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about this a little bit, but the one, of course, that pops first to mind is my mother's very sudden passing in 2018. Paul and I were away on holiday. We were up north just settling into bed, and I got a call from my sister that mom had had a stroke. So we drove through the night, and 2 days later she was gone. So although mom was 88, almost 89, it wasn't completely unexpected, but it was very, very rapid. And it was hard. It was hard for her to pass in a hospital and to not be able to be sure that she knew that we were there, and not knowing if she knew that we were saying goodbye, etc. And so that definitely, in many surprising ways, I had experienced death before, but never anyone quite so close. And who is that primary person? Mom. No matter what we want to say, mom is our very first attachment. So I was certainly surprised at my just like a lot of the physical reactions that I was getting, and I, thank goodness, had tapping as a skill to kind of keep my head above water through those early months, and really helped me to sort of float a little more easily through the grief process. I wouldn't say that tapping eliminated my grief. That would have been worrying, but tapping helped me. The best way I can describe it is it kept my head above water, so that if I had a wave of grief, I could help my body through that moment in time. And then my breath would come back, and tears would begin to subside, or I could just simply weep and support that process as well, and then ground and center myself again through the tapping and some of the energy exercises I do. The other one that popped to mind was when my husband lost his job completely unexpectedly from a high-tech firm, and he was happily employed, really enjoyed the job, and then boom, he'd been told he was one of their top engineers a few months beforehand, and we had planned a family trip to Europe. It was going to be 3 weeks for myself and the kids, and a month for myself and the children, and 3 weeks for him, because that's all the holiday time that he had. And about 4 or 5 days before we were supposed to fly out, this happened. And of course, my first reaction was, oh my God, we can't go. We won't be able to afford this. How can we possibly? You've got to stay here. You got to look for work. Little panic. And I didn't know tapping at the time. But as we calmed and settled and reflected, I went, no, wait a second. This is actually going to be really good, in that it's summertime. We're going to Europe. It's like, my mother-in-law was helping us. She had sort of set up the first half of the trip anyways, and she was helping us with it financially. And we reflected on the fact that now he could stay for the entire trip. So we were able to have visits in Italy with the Italian side of the family, and then in Britain with my side, the British side of the family. And it was a wonderful holiday. And I never, ever think of the fact, I don't even remember, unless I really dwell on it, that he was actually unemployed when we did that trip. It's more about how wonderful it was to take the children and for us all to go together. And none of them were, had jobs yet, or none of them were tiny. Like, it was just the perfect time for us to go. And it was the trip of a lifetime for sure. And I still look back on it very fondly, even though there was this sense of it being quite unexpected and came out of nowhere. And we did have something to sort of grapple with when we got home. So as Sue mentioned earlier, it's not always deep and dark. Unexpected life shifts can be very positive. And even if they may be challenging initially, later on, or when we look back on it, years later, we go, yeah, actually, that was exactly the point where things turned for me, or that was exactly the right thing. The timing was perfect, even though I didn't know it at the time.
Yeah, we often end up in a different place than we were expecting to be, but that different place can be a good place too.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to use the word better, because that, who's to say one path in the woods is better than the other path in the woods, but it does shift us from the path that we're on, potentially onto another path. And, between the two of us and the stories we tell, we touch on most of the unexpected life shifts that happen in life. And we asked all of you to provide your input as you were registering to join us today on, are you experiencing a life shift? And yes, 70-something% of you have experienced a recent life shift, something that's happened probably within the last couple of years. And the number one thing that most of the people joining us today have experienced is a job loss, which is, again, not too surprising given what's going on in the economy right now. But the other one, and it's bigger if you combine both the illness of a close loved one and the loss of a close loved one together, that is what a lot of people on this call have experienced as well. But an injury is there, a relationship breakup or a divorce is there, your own illness is there, lots of different things that, sort of knock us off the path that we're on. And sometimes it can be the universe really trying to get our attention. One of the other things that we see in the registration data is for a lot of people that have joined us today, it's not one thing, it's many things. And it sometimes that can feel like just, sort of gut punch after gut punch after gut punch of like, I can't take one more thing. And I think both Susan and I really believe that is, sort of something to pay attention to. And we hope by the end of this 90 minutes or so together that you'll have some really good tools to use to think about how do you navigate or deal with these unexpected life shifts when they happen. And one of the most important things that we talked about is, they are often shocking, and allow that shock to feel that shock and let that shock settle. You mentioned it yourself, Susan, in your story about Paul losing his job, that there was a lot of shock, and that the instant, almost automatic reaction was, we have to cancel our trip.
Mm-hmm.
And then the shock settled, and the executive functioning brain came back online. I was like, oh, maybe we don't have to cancel our trip. Maybe it's okay for us to still go on this family trip of a lifetime, and turned out to be a great decision. Do you want to talk about what happens in the body when we have an unexpected life shift, and how we react to that situation physiologically?
Yeah, well, I mean, I remember noticing when my husband came home that day, he was wound up. He was coping very well with the situation, but at that point in our lives, he was our sole wage earner. And so it was a big deal. And it was the second time, unfortunately, the second time that a high-tech type firm was struggling and was doing some layoffs. And I remember he looked kind of glassy-eyed, and one of the things that happens for many people is they go into the fight or flight response. So what I was witnessing, and what I've felt myself as well in my own body, is this sense of like a shock, really, literally like a neurological shock. And we go into the involuntary reflex called fight, flight, freeze, or fold. And they are degrees of coping with shock, and we just naturally choose a particular way to cope. So we may become very activated, more in our flight or our fight, or we may just kind of fold up and become kind of limp and unable to activate to figure out a strategy to move forward. Our blood pressure will often go up, our heart rate will go up with fight or flight. We feel scattered. Often our body will be jumpy, easily startled. We'll be knocking things over with our hands, bumping into furniture, walking into door frames. We're not really sure where our body is in space. And neurologically, we're kind of in overload. This reflex is meant to be activated for maybe a couple of minutes tops. It's a ancient reflex where I've talked about this a little bit on other episode, but we're supposed to live or die, save ourselves or not save ourselves. It's good or bad. And yet as human beings, losing a job or even having an injury is not necessarily, or disease is not necessarily life-threatening, truly, but the old reptilian, this ancient part of our brain, this ancient reflex is designed a very, very, very basic reflex to keep us alive. And it's, we tend to breathe more at the top of our chest, very shallow breathing. Our muscles tend to be tighter. Often our shoulders, are tight, and blood will be some of the blood will be removed from the front of the brain and around the digestive system, and it's quickly oxygenated and pumped out to the arms and legs so that we can run or kick or fight our way out of something. This is designed to save our lives, but a lot of the challenges we have, or an unexpected life shift, may not truly be a physical life-threatening challenge, but that reflex gets activated nonetheless. Interestingly, we also lose about 30% of our peripheral vision as well, which is not always the best thing. You'll be walking around without having our full visual range. And it takes a lot of resources to be in that state, right? One of the most important things is that our executive functioning skills, the newest part of the brain evolutionarily at the very front of the brain, is very, very important for impulse control, for decision making, for recognizing we have choice, that we have opportunity and options. That's offline when you first have that initial shock. Your body literally doesn't have enough blood in that part of the brain for it to function properly. So if you stay in that state, not only are you draining valuable life resources, your body's energies, but you're also unable to design a sort of be cognizant enough to design a strategy for change. Literally, step one, what's the first thing I need to do? Step two, what's the second thing? Who do I need to talk to? What do I need to arrange? How do I need to get things organized and together to minimize the damage or the fallout? Just using the example of, an illness or an injury, you would need to be coherent and cognizant to speak to your physicians, if you were, say, at the hospital, or to your doctor if you're in their office, to kind of go, okay, so what do I need to decide? What are my options? And to be able to process that, right? Like sometimes you can hear the information, but you're not actively remembering it or processing it. And that's all done in the front of the brain. So one of the things that's really important is that once you kind of receive that news, or you notice, okay, this is definitely happening. It may not all be good. There may be something that's really challenging here and it's unexpected, to then calm your nervous system enough that you can think straight, right? We need to be able to think straight, and it doesn't need to be immediate, but in those early days, we need to be able to settle ourselves down. Let's get our bearings. Let's get my energy grounded and centered, and have all my resources on deck so that I can, if there's a course correction needed here, then I will see that course correction. I will know what's needs to happen and how to get there, how to implement that. Often these unexpected life changes can literally be that. I've been a little off course. I've been accepting the unacceptable. I've been tolerating the intolerable. I'm thinking about something like a relationship that's gone, that you've outgrown, or that's gone sour in some way, and that you've really been needing to make some change to that relationship, but you've been avoiding it, or you're pretty convinced it's not going to become any better if I bring it to the forefront. But then something happens, some unexpected event happens that then creates a course correction, and you're almost sort of forced into the recognition that that change needed to happen maybe 2 years ago. So you want to have the blood here that does that work, that knows how to, where do I go from here? How do I move forward? Because if you stay stuck in that fight or flight, not only is it very hard on your body and can lead to a lot of fatigue, it also can affect our, like I said, our blood pressure. But also, if we stay there, it's very difficult to know what is the right path forward from here. And you can feel like, I'm going to try that, but you get indecisive. I'm going to try that, but maybe not. What about this? What about that? And often we'll even acquiesce to someone else. We'll say, you help me decide, right? But really what we need is to come into that part of the brain, come into a very calm place, and the inner wisdom will slide forward. We'll be able to hear or feel or just know, what's my first step? What's the number one priority that I need to take care of today, so that I can get back on track, or acknowledge my new track, and that this is not all negative. This is actually positive, and I'm on my way to something better.
We talked about the fact that there are signs that you're in that fight or flight, right? If there's like all or nothing thinking, right? This idea like, or I don't have a choice. I have to do something and there's no other option for me. There's many different ways that you can diagnose your own, like, hey, maybe I don't have my full executive functioning online here. And it really does come down to a lot of absolute thinking. It comes down to feeling perhaps like you're out of options, or that you, or the path forward really is not presenting itself to you. So Susan, one of the things that we're going to do as we walk through the 6-step process to deal with unexpected shifts, is at some point make sure that we are not in fight or flight. And there's a process to do that. Do you want to just share with us, like, what do we do if we think we might still be in fight or flight, freeze or fold? How do we, and by the way, what's really interesting to me is I'm a flighter and I'm a freezer, you know, so I'm either running for the hills or I'm like stuck like a deer in the headlights. So I ask you all to think, some people are fighters. Some people will come out swinging when life gets at them, right? Some people are quitters. They're like, oh, I'm just going to bed. I'm going to pull the covers over my head. I'm not going to deal with any of this. And some of you are like me, that you're fleers or you're freezers, right? So, but how can you tell if you're stuck in fight or flight or get out of fight or flight? What's something we can do to make sure that the fight or flight has been calmed?
Yeah, and I think it's important to also acknowledge that no matter, you know, as you think about yourself and you notice, oh yeah, I'm more of a freezer or I'm more of a fighter, to just really have complete compassion for yourself around that is something you've learned and is probably one of your earliest responses to stress. That, you know, a stress happened, you were probably very tiny, and you randomly chose one of those options, or you saw that happening around you. You watched how mom and dad cope with stress and you did the same. So I would categorize myself as maybe a little more of a fighter, that when there's something challenging in my life, I'm like, okay, let's deal with this. What are we going to do? It's not so much of a coming from an angry place. Usually it's just more of like a super activated, maybe not always helpful, but I'm trying to learn more and more to settle first and then make the decisions, rather than just, you know, my old MO would be just do something, anything, even if it's wrong, we can always change it. Right. So that's kind of what a fighter looks like. They quickly solve it. Let's get to business. Let's get down to, let's activate, fix it. So, you know, just remembering that no matter what way you cope with an unexpected life shift is okay. It's totally all right. But it is helpful to be mindful of what you're doing and just noticing that and having deep compassion for yourself. And then to check yourself for fight or flight. Those of you who are my students and some of my clients as well, you'll know that I use a very old-fashioned, well-known neurovascular head hold. So I'll just do this here and teach it to you, and I'll get everybody to follow along, not just listen and watch, but actually do this with me. This is the experiential part of the podcast, right? So take your index and your middle finger, and you're just going to allow whatever's coming up for you to come up. And place your fingertips in the middle of your eyebrows and slide up towards your hairline. There's first going to be a horizontal ditch, a skull anatomy. There'll be a little divot down, and then you're going to come up onto these two rounded mounds on your forehead. They're called the frontal eminences, and on the outside of the skull, they're rounded, and on the inside, they're concave. And what happens on the inside of the brain, if you have lots of blood in the front of your brain, is that there's a little bit of pooling of the blood behind these two mounds. And so you will get a very subtle pulse. You don't want to use your thumbs for this because you have a pulse in your thumb. You just want to use your index and your middle finger. And it is subtle, but if there's lots of blood in the front of the brain, in other words, you're not in fight or flight, right? The blood is fully flushed forward. It's nourishing that front part of your brain. And if you hold and wait, you may notice a subtle pulse in one or both of these frontal eminences. And you may also notice that you don't have a pulse, or that you only have one pulse and not the other, or that you do have two pulses, but they're not synchronized, right? So what you want to do is wait. And you're using the energy of your hands and this sort of physical contact with these points. And if you just sort of watch your breathing, there's nothing you have to do, just being very patient with yourself, which is hard to do when you're in fight or flight. But try to overcome that need to just, oh, it's not there. Never mind, right? Just let that be and just hold those points. And eventually those pulses will emerge and they will synchronize. And then you know you have lots of blood in the forebrain. And you'll probably even notice there might be a gulp or a sigh or a deeper involuntary breath. You may notice that your shoulders relax, or you want to kind of put your elbows down on the table and right? You kind of notice there's a shift in your body to a calmer state. Your nervous system is calming down. So you're activating the parasympathetic nervous system and calming the sympathetic. You're also activating the polyvagal nerves, which also create that calmer feeling where you can actually, okay, now I can problem solve. And if you do this, you'll recognize in brain gym, they call these the positive points, because you start to feel more positive about things. And why is that? Well, because there's enough blood in the part of the brain that does that for you. You'll begin to recognize you do have choice where you thought you didn't. That things aren't black and white, good and bad, right and wrong. That there's not necessarily a good guy and a bad guy in this, but that there's responsibility on both sides of this situation, and that there's a continuum of possibility, opportunity, choice. Hey, that's right. I maybe could talk to so-and-so. They might have a possible lead for me for a job or for an interview or for, they've been through this health challenge. Maybe I'll talk to them. But those people won't come to mind if you're in that fight or flight. You want to be out of that. That's about saving your life in the moment, very, very immediate, and then done. So you want to help your nervous system come out of that state and then come back into the place of, now what am I going to do? And for you to know those choices from a quiet inner wisdom, as opposed to, okay, I got to design something, but actually that deeper level of knowing that may be the way that my friend would solve this dilemma, but the way that I'm going to do it is this way, because I know this is right for me. So that sort of that inner knowing place of, actually, this is how I'm going to proceed from here moving forward, to either solve this or to get through it or to minimize the damage or to ask for help or to get help, right? Whatever we need to make it over the hump. So is that what you were talking about, Sue? That
It was, and I couldn't hold my hands up there for that long. So I got to work on my arms a little bit.
I should mention, for some people, if you tend to be in fight or flight a lot, or you have sort of what we talk about like a chronic state of fight or flight, there's been a lot in your life that's maybe been unexpected or a little shocky, and you haven't actually processed that shock through your body, it can take longer for those pulses to emerge. And as I said, they are subtle. But if you practice this, it could take 5 minutes, right? For them to emerge, but they will emerge. So what I love about this technique is it's not just about, am I in fight or flight or not, but it's also treating it if you are. So it's a two-step.
That's great. That's great. And, it's one of the thoughts I had as you were talking about sometimes the urge with fight or flight is to just do something and to get, sort of get on with something. Right. And one of the things I've been acutely aware of, I'm at the 6-month mark since my dad passed away, still very much in my own grieving process. And I keep reminding myself, they tell you that you shouldn't make any major changes during your year first, that you need to settle and let the grief process before you move into major life decisions. So, and I feel that with every unexpected life shift, or almost every one that I can think of, there is a component of grief. Obviously, the illness of someone you love, losing someone you love, yes, there's grief. We know that. But also losing a job, there's grief with that. An illness, your own illness, there's grief with that. Your own aging, there's grief with that. So life shifts even the positive life shifts that we choose and we want can bring grief, like choosing to go away to school or go away to another town or state for work and having to move farther away from people you love. There, it can be your choice, and there can be grief in that. So just a reminder to everyone, our very first episode was processing grief. If you haven't watched it and you have had an unexpected life shift recently, I would strongly recommend that you go back and you watch the episode on processing grief as well, because it is guaranteed that with life shifts, unexpected especially, there will be grief that comes with that.
Yeah.
So as
And so, sorry. The other thing I was going to mention is that also with something like a challenge, a big challenge to a relationship, right? A primary loving relationship, and something comes up in that relationship that's unexpected. Sometimes that knee-jerk reaction in fight or flight is, I'm out of here, right? That flight is like, okay, I'm just packing my bag and I'm gone. I'm leaving this relationship. That's it. I'm done. But if you can take that time to process the shock and access the inner wisdom, it may not be the end of the relationship or something really negative. In the end, it actually may be a turning point for the positive, to build a deeper connection, to sort of sort out some things that have been grinding away in the background that you haven't been giving time and attention to. And it can end up again on the other side of it, a sense of feeling happy that you stayed and you processed, that you didn't just cut and run.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the last thing maybe we'll talk about before we move on and start working with a couple of people, and hopefully those of you who have joined us today are thinking about whether you'll join us on stage with your own unexpected life shift. One of the things we talked about is while you're going through it, it can be very difficult to see an unexpected life shift as a positive thing. But when we look back, we see a lot of situations where unexpected life shifts lead to almost miraculous things. And the one we were talking about was Terry Fox's diagnosis of cancer, and that he set out to raise $1 for every Canadian. And for those of you who aren't Canadian at the time, in the 1980s, we were about 25 million people as a country, and his goal was to raise $25 million. Well, within a year, he had done that. And now, 40 years later, his foundation has raised $850 million for cancer research. And so while that was certainly an unexpected life shift for him, he was able to bring great purpose and meaning to his own illness and his own critical situation. So we just raise that there can be purpose and meaning. There can be major benefits that come out of having an unexpected life shift. And while it may not feel like that today, or possibly even this year, we hope that with some of these tools and with what we're talking about today, that you will be able to find the meaning for yourself and find a great path forward, because it does disrupt our plans, right? I love the phrase, life is what happens when we're busy making plans. And that's certainly what the unexpected life shift is all about.
John Lennon's famous quote. I thought I'd walk through the 6 steps you mentioned earlier, just a quick review of what we've been talking about, and we packaged it up. So step number 1 is to allow the fear, the grief, the anxiety, the shock, whatever it is, allow it to be there, whatever comes up. No editing. You're not allowed to edit, but just allow it to come up. Acknowledge what and how you're feeling. That's super important. That sense of allowing, and that's that, that deeply and completely accept myself. That's what that part of the tapping setup is about. Step 2, addressing your shock. Right. So unexpected life shifts often trigger that fight or flight reflex. So knowing that neurovascular head hold will be very, very helpful. And you may need to do it frequently in those early days and weeks after this life shift, whatever's coming up is coming up. You may also use things like not just tapping, but breath work, meditation, exercise, long walks, paddling, swimming, anything that kind of helps you to wind down, being in nature. Yeah. So verifying that you're then out of fight or flight, step number 3, making sure you're out of fight or flight. And number 4, tap on any feelings or fears that are left, that are still niggling at you, and that will allow you to have those aha moments, those learnings, those gems, those awarenesses, and allow yourself to be in that state of curiosity about what else is going on, and allowing that deeper inner wisdom to emerge for you to be able to hear it and know it and feel it, and then use that information to design a strategy for moving forward. Step 5, remember to process any grief associated with the shift, things that you have to let go of that maybe initially you don't want to let go of. Every unexpected life shift, even the positive ones, or the ones with positive outcomes, has an element often attached to it that is grief. And it's not bad. It's not always bad. And 6, it can't be forced, but you're working towards the recognition that you have received a course correction, and the ultimate goal is acceptance of what is, rather than clinging to what you wish it was. So that's that 6-step process.
So super simple, right?
Mhm.
Because I mean, I think about that, the ability to let go of our plan and allow what is to be, right? As opposed to, and letting go of the disappointment that maybe what is happening is not what we wanted for ourselves, or what we envisioned for our lives, or, that sort of thing. So,
I
so
almost
great.
feel like, now we've mentioned that quote, it almost feels like that could have been the subtitle for this podcast. Life is what happens while you're busy making other plans.
Exactly. We want to help you make conscious change.
Yeah.
And so, and to deal with and navigate these unexpected life shifts as positively as possible. So for those of you who haven't joined us before, what happens now, or haven't seen an episode, what happens now is we will invite hopefully 2 people to join us on stage, promote you to panelist, and have you work with Susan around your unexpected life shift. It could be one, it could be multiple. And what we almost guarantee, no complete promises, but what we almost guarantee is you will feel better at the end of the 30-ish minutes, 45 minutes that you spend with Susan than you did at the beginning. So it's a great opportunity for anyone who wants to join us on stage and talk about your particular life shift. And a couple of options. I see we have somebody listening from Nairobi, Kenya, who asks, is it okay to discuss old age as the reasons for the weakening body with parents openly, especially when there is very little to do other than ensure that they get the support they require to keep going, even though the obvious thing coming is death. So, definitely want to address the question before we move into the actual tapping. And I can talk personally from my own experience. Yes, it is absolutely okay to talk openly and honestly with your parents about what they're experiencing and what they're going through. They may or may not be able to hear it, but this is something we will all experience in our lifetimes, unless we have a sudden accident, die younger than expecting. But aging is a process, just like growing up is a process, and we can talk about it. Susan, I know you did some work with me, and I'm sure you've done work with other people around processing the grief of a parent's illness or decline. So what would you say to that, answering that question?
Can you see my wheels turning? So here's my take on it, and I'm not a geriatric expert, obviously, but and I'm drawing from my experience with being a primary caretaker to my almost 94-year-old father. Bless him. So first and foremost, I think it's important to assess, is it you as the helper, as the child, that needs to process, that needs to talk about the parent's failing physical abilities? Or is it the elderly parent that needs to talk about it? That's super important, because if it's upsetting you, if you're the one that's struggling with it, and of course you are, we all went to see our parents' age is scary. it affects, it's hard to watch them losing their capabilities and losing parts of themselves that we've been in love with our whole lives. But also it also reminds us of our own aging and our own mortality, of course, and what's it going to be like for us as we age. So it's easy if it's you. If you're upset by witnessing this, then you tap for yourself. You don't need to talk to your parent necessarily, but you get the work, you get the help that you need to help you to feel easier about it. It's still going to be present in your life. So this is going to be an ongoing project. I tap regularly on what I'm seeing in my father. I don't always talk to him. I actually don't talk to him a lot about it unless he brings it up. So I would say if your parent is wanting to talk about it and they need to process through talking about it, if you've dealt with your worries and fears about it, you're more grounded, you're more calm, and you'll be able to assist them or reach out for help for them if you think they need help processing that. In my situation, and what I've noticed with both my parents is that they tend to not talk a lot about it, but they are coping with it and dealing with it. And it pops out from time to time. I'll hear, where they're trying to do something and they can't do it anymore. Oh dear, it'll be something like that. And then I will say, do you need some help with that? Or are you okay? And they may choose to share more or not. And it's important for us to kind of respect where that is for them. We may have an opinion like you have to talk about this. This is the only way you're going to feel better about it. You have to talk about it. It's not true. That in actual fact, that them talking about it may actually stir those emotions up even more. And if they don't have an avenue to help their nervous system calm down from that you can actually make the situation worse or more challenging for them. If they're willing to tap, then that's fabulous. Or you can tap for them with their permission. Just like an everyday example is Dad's had to have some dental work lately. Right. And this is something neither he doesn't want it and I don't want to have to take him for that. And it's so, but I have tapped with him while in the waiting room. I've tapped with him after an extraction. When I brought him back to his room at the long-term care retirement home, I've tapped with him a little bit, just simple. We don't even really use any words because at this point, his cognition isn't at the point where he can't always understand what to say and how to say it, but I'll just do a little bit of tapping and very lightly. So that was rough, Dad. Nobody likes extractions, eh? They're the worst. Just very lightly and just do just offering a little support to his body. So I think that's really important for you to decipher, is it me that needs to talk about this or do they need to talk about it? And if they do really need to talk a lot about it and they only want to talk about it, then I would offer, see if you can find a referral to a social worker or a counselor, have a third party involved, because you're not skilled in that area. I'm assuming you may be a social worker, but as children, it's very difficult for us to talk to our own parents about their failing health. So if they really want help, don't push it on them. But if they're like, yeah, I wouldn't mind talking to a social worker about how it feels about getting older. And if there's things I can do to help myself feel easier, then ask for referral to a social worker. And hopefully you have access to that. That would be my advice.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, Susan. And one thing I will share is that with my dad, my main form came in, and his was a terminal diagnosis, so it was slightly different processing that needed to happen. But for me, it was a lot of asking him of what did he want to do in the time that he had left, and my wish to help him achieve those things, if possible. So a trip back to Mexico to say goodbye to people that he had loved there for for decades, and a trip to the place where he was living his best life as a dude in a dude ranch on horseback, where he met my mom, and different things that really mattered to him as he was approaching the end of his life. And they were sometimes challenging moments, but they, I'm happy that I didn't let that pass. I gave him the avenue to share that. But as Susan said, it was more his need than my need to make sure that he had what he needed to pass on. One of our guests asked how much detail about the situation will be discussed. And so the answer would be whatever you're comfortable sharing. It can be done with very little details. In fact, we would ask that you keep that you keep some of the specifics to yourself, especially if it would, sort of out somebody. So, but you can definitely talk about, sort of the feelings you're having, the struggles you're having. So, it can be as much or as little as you want to share about the specifics of your situation and still get the benefit from it.
Yeah, and everybody will be tapping. I hope you'll take full advantage, even if you choose not to volunteer, that you will tap along and focus in on the unexpected life shifts that you've been through. Choose one, and preferably one that's more moderate. Those more profound life shifts, those big ones, especially if you haven't already done some processing on it through your body, tapping, then this isn't the right venue for that. That would be something you would want to do more in a one-on-one session, but something that had challenge to it, that was unexpected, that that when you think about it now, there maybe is some distress, but it's not on that scale of 0 to 10, it's not an 8, a 9, or a 10. Sort of a 6, 5, 6 or lower.
So do we have anyone who has an unexpected life shift that they would like to tap on, or be part of the experience with? There's always this part of the podcast, we edit it out. So if you haven't been live with us, you don't actually see that this part of the podcast takes a little bit of time to get people who want to come forward and share their situation and tap with Susan on it. And if we don't have anyone, we're always happy to use me, because I have many unexpected life shifts that we can tap on, and everyone gets the benefit of the group tapping that happens. So there is no pressure. It's really just an opportunity to be working with Susan directly and have your situation addressed specifically. But there's we call it borrowing benefits. If you've been on our website, you'll see the document about what borrowing benefits are, why it's so helpful, the fact that when we tap, even if we tap on somebody else's issues, set the intention of our own, it will help with our own issues. So
yeah, and we have tapped on physical disease in a previous episode. We've tapped on grief. I'm wondering about maybe if somebody if they sort of scan back over their career, their professional life, or through maybe their post-secondary education, where something happened that they weren't expecting. And it may not even be like a layoff situation, but something popped up in your career that you weren't expecting. And it may have actually even been positive, but there was some distress around it. Like suddenly you were promoted and, your supervisor thought you were ready for this, and you're going, really? I'm not ready for this. I can't, do more public speaking, or I can't write, the way that I'm going to need to write for this position, or I don't want to travel that much, or, where something came up that initially and maybe ultimately felt really quite challenging, but not necessarily has a really deep and profound emotional long-term effect on you. It was just distressing in the moment. And even now, when you kind of reflect back and think on it, you're like, yeah, that was a tricky time for me professionally.
well, and I can certainly share that with one of the companies that I worked for, quite frankly, I made the wrong choice. And I ended up in a culture that was not a fit for me. Mm-hmm. And it really profoundly impacted me and my sense of self and my desire to keep doing that job. And so it's certainly something, Susan, that we can tap on if you want to, just in terms of job loss, the being forced to quit, which is something that essentially happened to me because of the culture and the conflict that existed there, and quite frankly, not feeling like that role was a great fit for who I am, which is why I'm doing something different today.
So it wasn't a good fit in the end.
It was not a good fit in the end. No,
I made the choice, but it affected sense of
And I
self.
thought I did my due diligence. I
Yeah.
thought I did my due diligence, and I thought I picked a good next step in my career, and I ended up in what was not a good place for me. And that
Mm.
led to a lot of growth, but it also led to a lot of pain along the way as I was figuring all of that out. And in the end, I made the decision to leave. So it was, but I felt like I didn't have a choice. And honestly, that phrase, I made the decision to leave, but I felt like I didn't have a choice. That happened to me a few times in my career. It wasn't just that one time. It was, I'm super sensitive to other people's energies, and the culture fit has to be right. When it's right, it's great. And when it's not right, it can be awful.
Yeah, it can be very fatiguing. Okay, Sue, does anybody want to jump in with Sue? So we've got a little even more to deal with. We can totally just work with Sue, but does anybody have something similar they've been through where they chose a particular position or changed firms, but they'd like to join in? Just let us know, and we'll pop you into the main screen here, and we'll all work together. And it's okay if nobody steps up too. That's all.
Somebody says, I recently resigned for all those reasons. Would you like to join us, or would you like to stay in the background and just tap along and borrow benefits? Those are two very reasonable choices. So
hi, Donna.
Want to come join us? We would love to have you. So we're going to promote you to panelist, Donna. If anybody else wants to join us, we can have more than one. Dawn is joining us right now. We've got I can join if no one else does. And I don't know if that's I want you to join if you want to join. So I will leave that. Say yes if you want to join, and never mind if you don't want to join. Denise is going to join us as well. So here we go. One more promote to panelist. And hello, Donna. So nice to meet you.
Thanks so much.
I love all these tappers stepping up, because I think because you've had the experience of tapping, that you know that you're safe with tapping. So.
And Susan, just before we start, please explain borrowing benefits again.
Sure. Yeah.
So that people can understand how they set up for themselves and how tapping with somebody else on their issues can help them.
Borrowing benefits is a tapping term that was discovered, a process that was discovered that when we're tapping in a group, we also, even if the specific topic we're working on with the volunteers, it doesn't directly relate to our situation, as long as we focus on our situation during the setup at the beginning, and then we check in at the end, we will find that even though I've been using the words of someone else's situation, my situation feels lighter. So I'm processing simply by sort of setting it up in the data entry key here on the side of the hand. The triple warmer meridian runs through the side of the hand, and this is the meridian that's in charge of generating the energy for that fight or flight. But we also use it to sort of let the body know it's okay to settle down. This is what we want to work on. This is where we're focusing our time and attention for healing today. And so we tap on the side of the hand, and each of you that aren't on screen, you're going to, just for this part, you're going to just focus in on what comes to mind for you that's more moderate when you think about an unexpected life shift. And you're going to choose a number from 0 to 10. How uncomfortable is this? And I'd prefer if you chose something with sort of a 6 or less, a 7 or less. And then you're going to walk through the process with us using the words of Donna and Sue and Denise. And then at the other end of the process, you're going to check in with your particular specific issue and reassess your SUDS number. SUDS meaning subjective units of distress from 0 to 10. Okay. So Sue, if you kind of sort of self-reflect for yourself what you are working on, as you sort of tune into it right now, present time in your body, what would your number be now?
I've done a lot of work on it with you. So, it's definitely, but I'm still frustrated. I'm still frustrated, to be honest, with the way the situations went, and that they had to go that way. The unexpected life shift is something comes along that causes you to have to take a different direction than what you were originally planning on. And there's disappointment and frustration there. So I would put that in that 4 or 5 range of like,
Yeah,
didn't have to happen, didn't
Yeah.
have to be like that.
right. And do you have a specific location in your body where you feel that 4? In other words, how do you know it's a 4?
Probably my chest, like my sternum.
Awesome. Okay, so just kind of focusing there, and each of you can do this, just focusing there and reflecting on that number. That'll get us started. Hi, Donna.
Hi, Susan.
Hi. As you kind of reflect on your unexpected life shift, what pops to mind for you?
I would say a 6. It's fairly recent, and
Yeah.
I really just resonated with everything that Susan was saying before that. So
Yeah.
that's why I had to jump in, because
That was like the getting laid, was it getting laid off?
I resigned actually, so
Right.
but felt I had no choice. So,
Yeah,
Mhm.
got it.
That
Beautiful.
happens to a lot of us, Donna. It's crazy that,
I-
you know,
I feel like I'm in great company, so I feel better already.
Yes, yeah. And the 6th feeling, where would you guess it would be in your body? That
I have been tapping as much as I can do recently, because again, it's only been a couple of weeks, but it's my swirling thoughts. It's my racing, going back over the sort of the event and thinking it through again, or collecting evidence. I think that's another thing that I'm constantly doing,
Yeah.
sort of to justify what happened. So just I get out of it briefly if I get distracted, but so often I find that I've gone back into that. So
Yeah, the swirling thoughts, that's the fight or flight, most likely. Yeah. And where would you say that 6 might sit in your body if you addressed it this morning?
right in my head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Beautiful. Okay. And Denise, yeah, unexpected life shift.
I've had several in the past, so I can identify with getting suddenly laid off. I can identify with the sudden death of a spouse at the age of 63. But what I'm finding now, it's almost it's a shift in my health, but it's almost an anticipatory grief or shift, because for 3 years, everyone said, oh, especially my daughter, who's a doctor, you're so healthy, Mom, if you get COVID, it'll be mild, you'll sail through it. And COVID took me out at the knees.
Yeah.
And I'm still dealing with it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still in the process of recovering,
Yes.
and baby steps. But I think what I'm realizing, and what is catching me, and it's catching me in my chest and my throat, is I'm about to turn 80 in 10 days time.
Yes.
It's like, how the hell did I get here?
Yes.
You know? And that I know that people are surprised because I don't present as that old, but all of a sudden it's hitting me. I'm going into another decade, and what is that going to mean for my health? What is that going to mean for my art? What is it going to mean for all those kinds of things? So there's almost an anticipatory. It's definitely, I mean, it's just a day. It's going to happen one day.
Right. Yeah.
In about 10 days.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit more. But I'm living with that, and I'm just realizing, and that one of the reasons I was reluctant to come on was I thought, well, that's not really
No, that's perfect. That's
but
perfect. I will get you to put aside the layoffs and the grief.
Yeah.
Sudden passing.
I just as you were talking,
now.
I can identify.
Yeah,
they're in the past.
And this, well, we can, you know, that work can be done outside of the podcast, but within the podcast, I think what's really coming to front of mind is I'm about to have my 80th birthday, and although it's expected, you know, every year I'm a year older, but how the heck did I get to this age? Wow, I'm 80, right? That sort of and the residue, the leftovers of COVID, that it really has hit me. Like you said, it took me out at the knees. So although I think that is currently a little higher than a 6, I know that you are a tapper, and that EFT can handle that, and we will proceed because it's right there for you.
It is. It wasn't when I signed on, but it got.
Yes. Well, isn't it amazing, how the body knows, and it will.
And I think
towards
just to throw this into the mix, my husband was exactly 9 days older than me. So
Wow.
his 80th birthday is coming up too. So that's in the mix too, 9 days ahead of mine.
Right.
We will celebrate his.
Yeah. So
and
what
he's not
will
here.
Yeah. So I think that's really important. It's very much a tappable issue, but would it be okay if for now, just because we have limited time, that you do your best, and we don't always have conscious control, but you do your best to focus on you for now? And
Absolutely.
then I trust that you will also call up one of your tapping buddies and tap on the anticipatory grief around your husband's birthday as well. Is that okay? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I just wanted to explain, I think, where some of the emotion is coming from.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And we can kind of sort of roll it into the soup, but I don't want to open too many windows for the time frame that we have.
And
Exactly.
Susan, I want to say two things to Denise. One thing, Denise, is I've talked to so many people lately that are struggling with age. So
Mhm.
this is pertinent, whether it's 30, 40, 50,
Mhm,
60, 70, 80, 90. Like there is something about aging that is universal. And I think that's very helpful. Thank you. And the second thing is, it's my dad's birthday on Thursday, and I've been cranky pants, like cranky pants for the past week. And I know exactly how you're feeling. So we're going to tap on all of that, even though we're going to tap on just the stuff that Susan wants us to. But
Yeah, I'll do my best to make minestrone soup. That's what I call it. Just throw it all into the pot. All righty. So I'm going to use some of your words, and for everybody out there, you just take a moment to reflect on what's coming up for you in terms of an unexpected life shift. Allow yourself to feel in the present moment what that might still feel like for you. Please choose a more moderate discomfort or distress, and off we go. So repeating after me, and I'll get everyone to sort of call and repeat. Even though I have this unexpected life shift,
Even though I have
though
this
I have this
unexpected
unexpected
life
life
shift.
shift.
and on many levels, I know I'm getting older.
And on
And
many
on many
levels,
levels,
I know
I
I'm
know
getting
I
I'm
know
older.
I'm
older.
getting old.
That's not unexpected,
It's not.
That's
That's not unexpected.
but how I'm feeling about approaching 80 is.
But how I'm
how
feeling about
Feeling
approaching
how I'm
approaching
age is,
approaching
80
65 is
And maybe some of it is exacerbated because I am still dealing with COVID.
and maybe some of it's
Some of it is
exacerbated because I'm still
exacerbated because I'm
dealing with
still
COVID.
dealing with COVID.
My doctor daughter said, you'll be fine.
My doctor
Doctor said, you'll be fine.
Even though you're almost 80, you're so healthy.
even though you're almost 80,
Almost
so
80.
healthy.
You're so healthy.
The truth is, it took me out at the knees,
The truth is, it took me
Says
out
it
of the knees,
Yeah.
at the knees.
and I can feel it this morning
and I can feel
Feel
it
it.
as I approach my 80th birthday.
as I approach my
Approach my
birthday.
80th birthday.
And I deeply and completely accept how I feel.
I
And I
deeply and
deeply
completely accept how I feel.
I'm a 6 on that, or sorry, I'm a 8, 9 on that, Denise.
I was gonna say 6, but it went up.
Yeah, that's all right. You know what your number is.
Yeah.
Okay. Even though
Even though
So
I recently had to resign,
I recently had to resign,
but I had no choice.
and I had no choice.
I've been living with my swirling thoughts in my head,
I've been living with my
swirling thoughts in my head.
all those racing thoughts,
all
All
of
those racing thoughts.
trying to justify what happened.
kind
Trying
of
to justify what happened.
I'm collecting all this evidence,
I'm
collecting all this evidence.
and it's swirling in my head.
It's
It's
swirling.
Whirling in my head.
I'm about a number 6 with this,
I'm
About a number 6 with this.
and I deeply and completely accept how I feel.
And I
And I
deeply
deeply and
and
completely accept how I feel.
Even though I feel like I made the wrong choice,
even though I
back then.
feel like I made the
Even
wrong
though I
choice.
feel
choice,
like I made the
back
wrong
then.
choice back then.
I thought I'd picked the right choice,
I thought
thought
that
I
it was
Pick the right choice.
and I'd done due diligence with this decision.
And
And
I
I
done
done due diligence with this.
I thought I'd picked my best next step professionally,
I picked my best next step
step
professionally.
professionally.
but I soon realized that I'd made the wrong choice.
But I soon realized that I
Realized
made
I
the wrong
made the wrong
choice.
choice.
And it really affected my sense of self,
I really
really
accepted
affected my
myself.
sense of self,
my ability to perform and to be focused.
my ability to
perform
and be
and to be
focused.
focused.
And in the end, I was kind of forced to quit.
And in
And
the end, I was
I
Kind of forced to quit.
It wasn't a good fit in the end.
It wasn't.
It wasn't a good fit in the end.
Culture didn't work for me at that company.
The culture did not
It
work.
didn't work for me at that company.
And in the end, I felt like I had no choice.
And in the end,
And I felt like I had no choice.
I deeply and completely accept how I feel.
I deeply and completely
completely
accept
accept how I
There we
feel.
go. Okay, so we're all dialed up. And we're just gonna do probably 3 rounds here. And everybody can say these words because you've already reflected on your specific situation here on the side of the hand. COVID took me out at the knees.
COVID took me.
COVID put me out at the knees.
Nice deep breath. She said I'd be fine if I got it.
She said I'd be
That
fine.
would be
if I got
fine.
it.
I got it.
And I'm so healthy for 80,
And I'm so healthy.
So healthy for 80.
but COVID really got me.
But COVID really got me.
And it has made me reflect on my age.
And has made me
Made
reflect
me
on my
reflect on
baby.
my age.
As I get closer to my 80th birthday,
As I get closer to my 80th
Closer
birthday,
to my 80th birthday.
I think, how did I get here?
I think, how did I
How
get?
did I
When
get
did I become 80?
When did I become 80?
become 80?
When did that happen?
When did that
That
happen?
happened.
I can't believe I'm 80.
I
Can't believe I'm 80.
And I wonder,
And I wonder,
Wonder.
struggling with COVID
struggling with COVID
because I'm 80.
because I'm 80.
She said I was so healthy, I wouldn't struggle with it,
She said I was so healthy that I
Yeah,
wouldn't struggle.
struggle with it.
but that's not what happened.
But that's not what happened.
I'm still coping with the leftovers.
I'm still coping with the
Big
leftovers.
leftovers.
My breath is still not quite right.
My breath is still not quite
Still
right.
not quite right.
Mhm. And I'm just wondering,
And I'm
I'm
just
just wondering,
is it
wondering,
because I'm older?
is it because I'm older?
Yeah, as I approach my 80th birthday,
As I approach my
Approach my
80th
80th birthday.
there's some unexpected sadness.
There's some unexpected sadness.
And I'm tapping on that now.
And I'm tapping on that now.
Beautiful. Okay, we're going to go back up to the eyebrows. I chose very carefully
I chose very carefully.
and I did my due diligence.
And I did my due diligence.
I really thought it was the right choice for me.
I really thought it was the right choice for me.
Put a lot of time and effort into making the right choice.
Put a lot of time and effort into making the right choice.
I wanted to make sure that it was a good fit for me.
I wanted to make sure that it was a good fit for me.
In the end, the company culture just didn't fit.
In the end,
The company culture just didn't fit.
And I really felt like I had no choice but to leave
and I really felt
Really
felt
felt like I had no choice but to leave.
because it really affected my sense of self,
it really affected my
Affected my
sense of
sense of self.
my ability to perform the way that I wanted to.
my
and my
ability to
ability to
perform the way
perform
the
the
way
way
that
that I wanted to.
I thought I got it right.
I thought I got it right.
Thought it was a good choice.
I thought it was a good choice.
Thought I'd chosen well.
I thought I'd chosen well,
But in the end,
but in the end,
poor fit for me.
poor fit for me.
For me.
Not a good fit in the end.
Not a good fit.
Not a good
for
fit.
me.
in
And I
the
had
end.
no choice but to move on.
I had no choice but to
I
move
had
on.
no choice but to move on.
I had no choice but to move on.
I had no choice but to move on.
I've recently resigned
I recently resigned.
and it's still pretty fresh.
It's
Still
still
pretty
pretty
fresh.
fresh.
This was just a few weeks ago for me.
This was just a few weeks ago for me.
And I ultimately had no choice.
And
I ultimately had no choice.
And the way that I'm watching myself cope,
and the way that I'm watching myself cope,
that I have these swirling thoughts in my head,
that I have these
These
swirling
Swirling
thoughts
thoughts in my head.
all these racing thoughts,
All these racing thoughts.
where I find myself collecting evidence
where I find myself collecting evidence
to justify what happened.
to justify what happened.
happened.
I need to justify what happened.
I need to
I need to
justify.
Justify what happened.
It's around a number 6 for me.
Around
Around the number
Number
6
6 for me.
I'm all in my head with this.
I'm
all in my head
with this.
All in my head with this.
I'm all in my head with this.
I had to resign.
I
I
had to.
had to
Had
resign.
to resign.
I had no choice.
I had no
I
choice.
had
I had no choice.
I had no choice.
I had no choice.
no choice.
And I just need to be sure by justifying my decision.
And I just need to be sure about
by
justifying.
Justify
justifying.
my decision.
Because if I'm not sure, that might mean,
Because if I'm not sure,
I'm
that
not
might
sure that might
That
mean
might mean,
what pops to mind there? How would you finish that sentence, Donna?
that I made a mistake.
Yeah, yeah. If I'm not 100% sure,
I'm not
not
100%
100%
sure.
sure.
then it may have been a mistake.
Then it may
May have been a mistake.
I've got all these swirling thoughts.
Oh, swirling thoughts.
Need to justify it
Need to justify it.
Need to
so that I'm absolutely sure it wasn't a mistake.
So I'm absolutely sure it wasn't a mistake.
It can't be a mistake.
Can't
Can't be a mistake.
It wasn't a mistake.
It wasn't a mistake.
But if I don't fully justify it in my own mind,
But if I don't fully justify it in my own mind,
I might worry that it's a mistake.
I might worry that it's a mistake.
Mhm. Beautiful, yeah. So anybody can sort of answer this one. What are you aware of now? Now we've sort of started the energy rolling, got the energy moving a little bit. What's popping up for you now?
Well, I don't know if you could all see it, but I'm yawning my head off over here. So, which always happens as I'm processing and releasing the
Yeah.
pent up energy.
And for people who don't know, that yawn, sighing, gulp, involuntary breaths, just suddenly a deeper breath happens. That is the body sending us the signals that the energy is shifting, it's downgrading, it's flowing, like what we call, we're processing through and addressing the distress, and the body's able to relax.
The thought popped to mind for me. You asked Donna, what if, like, I've got to be sure I made the right choice.
What would it mean? Yeah, what would it mean if?
What it would mean?
Yeah,
And for me, it was maybe the problem is me, not them.
right. So thank you for your honesty around that. And this is also really important to this process, is you just get to be completely honest. You don't have to sugarcoat anything. You don't have to hide anything. You know, obviously you create privacy for yourself. You can tap for yourself or go into a session with someone, but you get to actually tell it like it is. Even if a part of you is going, oh, I can't say that. But yeah, you can. And that's exactly where the distress is. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily true in the end, but it is true now, in this moment right now. That's how I feel. And we want to honor that moment and help that process through, and then see where we land. Do it again, see where we land. And we always move forward in a more positive perspective. So maybe the problem, you know, if it turns out that I can't justify my leaving, then I'm the common denominator. What if actually the problem is me and not them? Beautiful. Denise, what are you aware of now?
Well, it definitely came down. I mean, it's still probably around a 6, but it definitely, the urge to flee.
Yes, yeah.
And I realize, and it's, admitting it is kind of hard, but it is, for me, I've never been able to share how old I am with people, because there's such a fear of being pigeonholed. Like, you know, when I turned 65 or 70 or 75 or whatever, it was almost like people perceive you and judge you and pigeonhole you. And so it just struck me that here I am on a stage of, I don't know how many people.
Yeah.
I know the two of you, and Donna, I recognize you, but it's like, okay, I've just admitted to the world that I'm about to be 80, and that's kind of uncomfortable, you know.
Did you say unhelpful?
Uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable.
Just a little
Oh, I love
uncomfortable.
it.
And yet I'm kind of chuckling at it too. It's like, oh, what the hell?
Yes.
You know?
Yeah. So it feels uncomfortable, even just a little bit. It still feels uncomfortable because
I don't want to be judged and pigeonholed,
Yeah.
and with society's tendency toward ageist assumptions,
yeah,
you know, and that sort
I
of
love
thing.
it.
And that's always been my fear of being of being misjudged
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
pigeonholed or
People
whatever,
making
you know.
assumptions. Yeah.
Treated differently.
So I generally don't talk about my age, and when I do, I'm usually amused at the reactions, because I'm often asked to prove it with my driver's license or something like that. So I mean, today I look like hell, but I mean,
Yeah.
normally.
I
But
love it, Denise. I love it. And so we're
So
gonna
there's that it's just almost this like, oh my God, I just came out of the closet, kind of, you know, the age closet.
well, there's your 80th birthday present to yourself, is
Exactly.
tapping on your assumptions that others are judging you, pigeonholing you because of your age, and freeing yourself. That's what you're doing. You're giving yourself this birthday gift of freeing yourself from the discomfort that you perceive others are
Right,
making, assumptions about you.
right.
And just Denise, what are you aware of, as we've just done a few rounds, but what's popping up for you? Or sorry, Donna, did I say Denise?
Donna.
Sorry,
Yeah,
Donna.
you
I've
said
got
Denise, you meant
two
Donna.
two D names here.
Yeah,
I found myself smiling a lot because I'm able at this point, as I'm going through those thoughts, to also see the positives that are coming out of this. And so I think that's real growth. And funny enough, Denise just mentioned the age thing, and here I am resigning at 64, thinking I'm going on my next new career. And
Yes.
that actually came up as something that they wanted to say, that I was retiring. And so I'm very proud of myself. I stuck up for myself and said, I am not retiring. I like, that just seems not even in my realm of thinking at this stage in my life, but others perceive me as being at that stage that I should be retiring. So
Yeah.
not
And
there
that
yet.
does that still feel a little uncomfortable that they made that assumption?
Oh, absolutely.
Good.
Absolutely.
Good,
Yes.
we're on track. We're on track. Okay, so even though
Even though,
I'm noticing we're getting close to our, we'll do one more round to tap it through, and then we'll pause our work after that, okay?
perfect.
So even though I'm noticing
even
Even
though
though
I'm
I'm
noticing
that I can see the positive in this,
that I can't see the
See the
positive.
positiveness.
I look like hell, but I'm outing myself.
Like, I'm outing myself.
And you don't, by the way, Denise, but I love, we're gonna use your words. I'm 80, I'm almost 80.
I'm almost
Almost
80,
80.
But I am able to see the positives.
but I'm able
And
to
I
see
am
the
able to see the
positives.
I'm not
positives.
resigning at 64.
I'm not resigning at
Resigning at
64.
64.
I'm moving into my next new career.
I'm
I'm
moving into
moving
my
into
next
my
new
next
career.
Why would they make that assumption?
Why would they make that assumption?
I'm not retiring.
I'm not
I'm not
retiring.
retiring.
They made the assumption
They made
Made the
the
that I was
assumption
resigning because I wanted to retire.
But I was
that I was resigning because I wanted to retire.
Not so.
not
Not
so.
But it does distress me a little
It does
does
distress me a little.
little
that they would assume that,
that
they
they
would
would
assume that.
when I'm really just moving on to my next best career.
I'm moving on to
really
my
just
next
moving
best
on to my
career.
best
And I deeply and completely accept how I feel,
And I
And I
deeply and
deeply and
completely
completely accept how I feel.
even though my natural urge is to flee,
even though
though
my natural
love
urge is to
urge
flee.
but that is definitely coming down.
That is definitely coming down.
What does concern me is how others judge your age.
What does concern me is how others judge your age.
I know people out there will pigeonhole somebody who's 80.
I know people out
People
there
out there
will
will
someone
pigeonhole
who's 80.
someone.
I'm uncomfortable with that.
I'm uncomfortable with that.
I don't want to be judged by my age.
I don't want to be judged by my age.
age.
I don't want to see others' assumptions about me
I don't want to
I
see
want to see others' assumptions about me
simply based on my age.
simply
simply
based
based on my age.
I love how people don't believe I'm as old as I am.
I love how people don't believe I'm as old as
I'm
I
as old as
And I, on a regular basis, I have to pull out my driver's license.
on a regular
On a
basis.
regular
I just
basis,
screw
I
up my
pull out
drive.
my driver's license.
But the truth is, I don't like being pigeonholed.
But the truth is, I don't
is.
like
I
being
don't like being
pigeonholed.
pigeonholed.
And I'm going to toss this in, Denise. You let me know if I'm off base. But I wonder if even for myself, I have some assumptions about what an 80-year-old is.
Wonder if even for
Even for
myself, I
myself,
have some
I
assumptions.
wonder if I have
assumptions.
some assumptions about an 80-year-old.
Maybe,
Maybe.
and maybe not.
I would say the word is fear rather than assumption.
Yeah. Yeah. I worry about what 80 means to me.
I worry about what 80 means to me.
And I'm tapping with that now.
And I'm tapping with that now.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I deeply and completely accept how I feel.
And I deeply and completely accept how I feel.
Even though as I reflect deeper on this,
Even though as I reflect deeper on this,
I worry that I may be the problem, not them.
I worry that I
I
may
may be the problem, not them.
This has happened a couple of times.
This has happened a couple of
What if
times.
it's me?
What
What
if
if it's me?
I don't fit into the culture,
I don't fit
Fit
into
into the culture,
company culture.
company culture.
And I deeply and completely accept how this feels for me.
Except how this
Deeply
feels.
and completely,
Feels for me.
this feels for me.
What if I'm the problem, not them?
What if I'm
What if I'm the problem, not them?
Mhm. What if I'm the problem?
What
Not
if I'm
them.
the problem?
Problem,
not
not
them?
them.
I'm the common denominator.
I'm the common denominator.
Yeah. What if it's me?
What if it's me?
What if it's me?
What if it's me?
As I reflect more deeply,
As I reflect more
Reflect
deeply,
deeply.
my fear is that it's me.
my fear is that it's me.
What if it's me?
What if it's me?
When I turn 80,
When I turn 80,
I know others are going to see me differently.
I know others are going
Others
to
are gonna see me.
They find out I'm 80,
They
They
find
find out I mean,
they'll judge me.
they'll judge me.
They'll see me in a particular light.
They'll
They'll
see me in a
see me
particular light.
particularly light.
And that older is bad.
And
older.
Older
bad,
is
bad somehow.
It's somehow not okay to be older.
Somehow not okay.
okay to be older.
They're going to pigeonhole me.
They're gonna
They're gonna
pigeonhole.
pigeonhole
And
me.
they're going to make all kinds of assumptions based on my age.
And they're going to make all kinds of assumptions based on this.
I'm worried that ageism is alive and well.
I'm worried that ageism is alive and well.
And I'm getting to the age where it affects me.
I'm getting to the age where it affects me.
And as I resign at 64 from one career,
And as I resign at 64 from one career,
others are assuming I'm retiring.
others are assuming.
I find myself justifying the move,
I find myself justifying the move,
this life shift that maybe they didn't expect.
this life shift.
Life shift that they didn't expect.
And maybe to a certain degree, I didn't expect.
Maybe to a certain degree I didn't expect.
They surprised me a little with that assumption.
It surprised me. a little.
Well, you're 64, you must be retiring then.
Well, you're 64. You
You must be retiring then.
I have no plans for that.
have
No
No plans for that.
I'm really looking forward to my next new career.
I'm really looking
Really
forward.
looking forward to my next new career.
Those are their assumptions.
Those are
Those
their
are
assumptions.
It's a little distressing to hear them say that,
It's a little distressing to hear them say that.
but I'm not retiring.
I'm not.
I'm not retiring.
Even though I find myself justifying my decision,
Even though I find myself.
Find myself justifying my
and
decision.
the swirling thoughts are kind of taking over in my head.
The swirling thoughts are taking over in my head.
I'm remembering that I'm not retiring.
I'm remembering that I'm not retired.
I'm moving into a new career.
I'm moving into a new career.
All right, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So each of you and those who are also online now, live and watching the recording, just coming back to the original presenting issue. There may be new aspects or what we call sort of aspects or chapters opening up that you go, oh, and there's an awareness that there's a bit of distress there or a bit of distress there. Make a note of them, write them down, come back to them and tap some more on those later. But just coming back to that original presenting issue, tuning into the place in your body where you felt it. I think it was in Donna's head. It was in Denise's chest. Just kind of, yeah, and chest, just kind of tuning in there and reflecting on that initial the initial distress or discomfort around the unexpected life shift. And I love how all three of them were your decisions, right? Like Denise, I know I'm coming up to it's not a surprise that I'm arriving at 80. And both Sue and Donna, it was your decision to move on, even though to a certain degree, Sue felt like she didn't really have a choice, but they still have a sense of distress or discomfort with them, which is often the case. I made the choice to go, but it wasn't completely discomfort free.
For me, I had done a lot of work on it already. So I was surprised how much was still there. And it's shifted right down to like a 0. So, but we're talking a few years back and a lot of processing since. So, yeah, I think
Mm-hmm. Well, I sort of feel a little compelled to mention that there is no time or space with this work. I've seen people work on things that are 60 years old. And it's still like a 9 or a 10 on the discomfort scale, on the sun scale. So it's really about how much have I processed through me. And not that you can only do that with tapping. You can do that with with a EMDR, you can do that with breath work. You can do that with energy exercises and body movement. A lot of techniques that are body centered, dancing, drumming. We process energy through our body in many ways, but tapping is the one that I use with clients, and the one that we were focusing on here for this podcast. What would your number be now, Donna? Do you suspect? And it's okay to say it's still a higher number. That's totally all right.
Yeah, I think it's a 2 or 3. I just feel just grateful for the whole process. And even though it's fairly recent, and I'm working myself on it really, really hard.
Good.
Just again, hearing commonalities, knowing it's not all about me, right?
Yeah.
And looking at it from a different lens is awesome.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And as you kind of, so those are wonderful perspectives, and it is early days still, but I know that EFT can offer relief in the moment. So as you come back to the swirling thoughts, I need to justify this decision. So testing, is it kind of important to compare apples to apples? Your perspective is great. However, we want to come back. I know I'm like a dog with a bone, coming back to the discomfort. Those swirling thoughts. I need to justify this.
yeah, so
yeah.
again, it's I feel like it's opened up space, maybe it's still perspective, but just those thoughts are certainly less, and it's more about where do I go from here?
Yeah, what's my next step? Yeah, that's good. So we always want to test our work and be careful, be aware of, is my mind telling me that I should feel differently about it, or do I actually feel differently in my body? And what we always want to go with is here. Because the mind can't change how we feel in the physical. It can to a certain degree, but it's often not long lasting. And we want this to be long lasting. And that creates that forward movement in life, and also forward movement on the right track. So we don't get, we don't end up making a decision and then reneging on that and feeling indecisive, or get wrapped, in procrastination or perfectionism, which really gets us stuck. And then we find ourselves a year later in the exact same place. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. I want to say to you, if your number is not a 0, it's okay. It's just repeat the process, keep going, address all the chapters that pop up, and over time you will find that it gets lighter and lighter and easier, and one day you'll go, oh, that's actually not bothering me anymore. Our perspective is everything, right? Our perspective about a situation, whether it's aging, whether it's a career decision, it's all about how we feel about it inside, and even how we feel about how others view us, but how that feels inside. Good. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. I'm seeing lots of people saying thank you in the chat, and thank you so much for attending. Thank you to Denise and Donna for joining us, for volunteering. Really appreciate you stepping up, and, as Denise said, outing herself. I love it. Thank you. Thank you.
And we're just going to send you back, and we'll wrap things up. So thank you so much, Denise. Thank you so much, Donna. And thank you so much, Susan. I'm always amazed by things that I feel, been there, done that, worked on that, and then, but sometimes there are vestiges in there. And I will share that those choices that I made were still unexpected life shifts for me, because I didn't expect to have to make those choices. And they ultimately did lead me to making a different decision about who I wanted to be in my career and how I wanted to approach my work life. And that, along with my dad's illness, drove me in a different direction. So I feel like that was my gift from the universe. If, the opportunity to make different choices that I've been wanting to make for a long time, but probably was just afraid to do. So
I think if I could sum up today's podcast, that phrase around, yes, sometimes life throws something at us that we didn't expect, but hey, what if it's a course correction? How wonderful that is. Perhaps there's a force in place that is actually, yes, it's short-term discomfort and distress, but long-term, I'm moving forward on my soul's path. I'm generating momentum in moving myself through the phases of life, and I'm learning all along the way, even if there is some discomfort some temporary discomfort, and that's key.
Agreed. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We hope you got value from the episode. I know that I did. And really want to thank our brave guests for joining us on stage. And for all of you, I hope you got some tools and tips to help you with your process of dealing with unexpected life shifts or even expected ones, because, you know, even though we're a little more in control when we make the decisions, there can still be the side effects that we talked about today. So all the best to all of you, and I hope you have a great week. And we look forward to seeing you next month when we talk about scarcity consciousness and how it is that we sometimes feel like there's not enough time, there's not enough money, there's not enough love, there's not enough whatever it might be. We can be stuck in scarcity consciousness. So we're going to talk about that next month, and we hope you'll join us.
I think it's the 18th.
The 18th at 11 a.m. Eastern.
There we go.
Thank you so much. All the best, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.